Well, the Trump administration targeting universities where we've seen some pro-Palestinian protests, going after federal funding for colleges like Columbia University, saying they aren't doing enough about allegations of anti-Semitism on campus. Columbia University faces a deadline to make a deal today. Reportedly, they're getting close to complying with Trump's 9 demands in order to keep $400 million in federal funding. But what are those demands? Well, some of the highlights include banning mass admission reforms, holding student groups accountable for the protests, formalizing a definition for anti-Semitism, and placing departments studying foreign cultures under academic receivership. Many of these demands are Trump's campaign promises made back in 2023.
The time has come to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left, defending the American tradition and Western civilization, protecting free speech, eliminating wasteful administrative positions that drive up costs incredibly, removing all Marxist diversity, equity, and inclusion bureaucrats.
So Columbia University isn't alone. The president also taking aim at his alma mater this week. The administration announcing a plan to pause $175 million in federal funding to the University of Pennsylvania over the school's policies with transgender athletes. Now, Penn became a major focal point in 2022 when it had a transgender student who won swimming championships on the women's team. Penn says it has not received any details about the federal funding freeze from the administration as of yet. But $175 million would account for nearly 18% of federal funding it does receive. In fact, all 8 Ivy League schools receive hundreds of millions in federal funds every year. The threats against some of these funds have universities across the country saying they'll be making some changes. The nation's top universities are caving to Trump's demands, laying off workers, imposing hiring freezes, shutting down laboratories, and facing federal investigations. And many also scrubbing diversity, equity, and inclusion policies from their websites and canceling related events. Joining us now to discuss the impact on students who attend these schools is Eliana Birman, a freshman at Columbia University. Great to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So as you well know, Eliana, the argument being made on the right is that the federal government is essentially funding schools across the country to teach students to be hypercritical of America without ensuring the safety and well-being of Jewish students, specifically on campus. What's been your firsthand experience?
My experience has been that really has been the case. I don't know that most of the teachers at the school are necessarily pushing this agenda, but I definitely think there are some teachers who have participated in these protests and who have brought their opinions into the classroom in ways that are very radical and not really appropriate. And that has made it really uncomfortable to be a Jewish student on campus.
These are a few of the president's demands. We've outlined them a little earlier as well: banning mass admission reforms, holding student groups accountable for protests, formalizing a definition for anti-Semitism. What's been the reaction to some of these moves specifically on campus?
People have been specifically very upset about the mask ban policy because these protesters, their main way of kind of getting away with it is hiding their faces and refusing to speak to media and not showing their identity in any way, shape, or form. And so this mask ban is really important in order for people to receive the proper consequences for these protests, because these protests are really harmful, not just to Jewish students, but to all students at the university who are just trying to learn and they're just trying to go to class.
Do you mind expanding on that a little bit? How have they personally made you feel, and why? Would you share your experience?
Sure. One thing in particular that I remember is during the occupation of Milbank Hall at Barnard a few weeks ago, everyone was wearing masks, everyone was wearing sunglasses, everyone was wearing keffiyehs, and it was really hot in the room, and yet people refused to drink water because they didn't want to take off their masks. And anytime that someone did drink water, their face was immediately obscured by a black umbrella. And these people occupied the building for hours and hours. And when they were finally kicked out of the building, nobody was asked to identify themselves. And so these people are all still walking around campus, and we know that they're probably going to do this again.
We've only got about a minute left, but I want to squeeze these questions in. If Columbia accepts the terms to keep their funding, how do you see these moves changing the culture on campus? And what do you make of the president making this a priority overall?
I really appreciate that this has been a priority because it's been our experience for the past year and a half, if not more, at the university. And knowing that it's a priority is very comforting and reassuring. And I think that if these demands are met by the university, it'll be a safer community for Jews on campus. And it'll also just be a community where people really are learning as opposed to skipping class to protest and you know using their time on campus for the wrong reasons, because this tuition is being paid for us to learn on campus, and I think it hasn't been the best learning environment for the past year and a half.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.